All right. Speaking of mentors and empowering young scientists, I'm very happy to pass the torch on to Dr. Annette Sohn, whom I consider as a mentor and someone who has been very supportive of my career. It's so good to see you, Annette.
Thank you, Rainer. And for those of you just joining, Rainer's just completed 2 hours of moderating out of the 24. So thanks so much to you for your support for the program. And hopefully you can take a break now. So welcome to everybody joining us in real time, as well as those watching after the fact. We are at, as was mentioned, hour 17, and we have 3 talks that we're excited to bring to you, and they range in topic area, but they're also from Asia, although the speaker is currently in the UK, and from sub-Saharan Africa. So our first speaker will be Dr. Jakkrapatara Boonruang, also better known to people here in Thailand as Dr. Fair. And so welcome to you, Dr. Fair, for your presentation on Tangerine, Transformative Care Models in Thailand.
Thank you, Dr. Annette, for your lovely introductions, and greetings, distinguished audiences. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world. Thank you very much for tuning in and participating in this amazing event. And today I will present to you about the Tangerine Clinic, an exemplar from Thailand that pioneered trans-led HIV responses in the country. And without further ado, I would like to share my disclosures. And this is the brief outlines of today's presentations. We will delve into bits about Thailand's landscape and barriers to sexual health-related services before the Tangerine Clinic was established. Then we will discuss into details about the clinic itself, focusing on the principles and strategies that we employ to develop a comprehensive service delivery programs for trans and gender diverse individuals. And I will end the sessions with a few takeaway messages. So as you can see, for this presentation, it will be more likely to be an overarching theme of HIV and AIDS researches and how it can be integrated into sexual health services. So now we are turning back time to 2015, a time when things were much different from today. Then the HIV prevalence among the transgender women in Thailand is rather high, ranging from 10 to 15%. We do not even have data on trans men at all. And those numbers themselves are somewhat unreliable. This is because the trans women were not recognized as a distinct key populations in Thailand's national AIDS program. They were rather categorized under the men who have sex with men umbrella. And that makes it hard to truly estimate the impact of HIV on these populations. Gender stigma and discriminations was suspected to be prevalent in that time. However, Thailand did not have a monitoring program at that time, then again makes it hard and difficult to gauge the actual impact of stigma and discriminations among trans individuals at that time. So basically, we were living in ignorance then when it comes to gender identities. Trans people were practically invisible to healthcare system and services that are tailored for them, such as gender-affirming care, are practically non-existent. The only thing that we know for certain is that there is a clear need to establish a trans-inclusive services across HIV care continuum. And with that questions, it influenced the community consultations among trans and gender diverse people in 2015. Hosted by the prevention team, which later became IHRI, and support from USAID, the consultations uncovered 3 key themes that informed the establishment of Tangerine Clinic. First one is the health parities. Despite the availability of PrEP at that time, the uptake rates among trans and gender diverse people are extremely low in Thailand. This is because the key healthcare priority among this population was never HIV, but rather to fulfill their gender identities through hormonal care and therapy. The shift in this perspective influences the key principles of the Tangerine Clinic, which is to use hormonal treatment as a gateway to attract people in this community to access HIV-related care. Secondly, we uncovered essential service factors. Community representatives emphasize the need for a stigma-free and particularly those that offer trans providers. And lastly, we uncovered some challenges, and those are the needs for the trans competent physicians and increased visibility for trans men. And with all these lessons, the Tangerine Clinic was founded in 2015. It is the first trans-led sexual health clinic in the country that encompasses several services that tackle the community's emerging needs. After 10 years of operations, we continue to adhere to the clinic's core principle, which is to put community first in both directions and executions. And this is our lovely team, and some of them have been with us since day one. After 10 years, we were able to provide care to nearly 7,000 transgender women clients. Almost 88% of them received HIV testing, 92% of them were HIV negative, and 31.7% of them has been initiated PrEP. And for those who were diagnosed with HIV, we were able to engage them in HIV treatment cascade. Almost all of them have initiated antiretroviral drugs, and 95.8% have achieved viral suppressions. At this point, some of you might be wondering, when is this going to be related to HIV and AIDS research? This is that part. Not only did Tangerine Clinic pioneer the innovative approach to HIV care, it also expanded its strategies to encompass research, both clinical and implementations, as well as capacity building and policy advocacy. These strategic wheels helps translate clinical researches into sustainable actions. For clinical research, we leverage community engagement and insights that we gain from care provisions to guide our research questions. The prime examples for this would be the research projects to close the implementation gaps in PrEP care. According to the several publications and insights from our clients, drug-drug interactions between gender-affirming hormone therapy and PrEP remains a significant barrier to PrEP uptake among these populations. In response, we conducted pharmacokinetic studies to uncover the drug-drug interactions between these combinations. These findings the findings from these studies has been published earlier this year, and hopefully the finding itself will help inform the development of the national and even international PrEP guidelines in the futures, so that the future generations of trans people do not have to live in fear of unknown and be scared of taking PrEP because of the drug-drug interactions. Moreover, we also designed several implementation research projects to tackle emerging needs among trans and gender diverse people. This includes projects on PrEP, chemsex, mental health issues, and stigma and discriminations. All these issues are considered as the syndemics of HIV, meaning that they are critical factors that influence the individual's relationship with HIV and its care. There was an extensive pool of knowledge that informed the researchers and providers that these issues are actually associated with PrEP uptake, ART uptake, and their adherences. Therefore, it is undeniable that these issues are key to accomplishing the goal to end AIDS by 2030. Apart from the scientific initiatives that Tangerine Clinic has conducted, it also established a technical assistance body that facilitates domestic and international collaborations and solidarity. After 8 years of establishment, Tangerine Academy has successfully assisted several Thai organizations and other international organizations in 9 Asian countries. These efforts resulted in the establishment of several trans-led clinics in these regions, specifically Asia and the Pacific region, and also across country research collaborations. These collaborations is the birth of the cohorts called C-Trans, which is the cohort to collect data from transgender women in Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, marking one of the first trans cohort collaborations in Southeast Asian countries. And lastly, scientific research translates into impact through policy advocacy mechanisms. Tangerine Clinic utilizes its cohort to advocate for the integrations of gender-affirming care to the universal health coverage in Thailand. By constantly providing necessary data to the government, it informed the needs for the gender-affirming care for Thai, trans, and gender-diverse people. And in collaborations with several civil society organizations, the NHSO has agreed to allocate up to $4 million to support gender affirming care in the fiscal year 2025. This will allow all Thai trans and gender diverse people who need gender affirming care to receive these services for free. For me personally, I think this is one of the most significant achievements the Tangerine Clinic have achieved, and proving that community-led research is not only practical, but also translatable to national policy. While these efforts were made possible by, of course, the communities and researcher endeavors, it is also very important to acknowledge the funding sources that support these journeys. This includes PEPFAR through USAID and National Institute of Health research grants from the US, which were recently terminated or limited earlier this year. Following the APLOP funding cuts, we have almost 10 implementation projects have been prematurely closed out. The international fundings that was used to support Tangerine services has been terminated, prompting the clinic to initiate a fee-based services. Unfortunately, monetary incentives and monetary barriers remains challenges in Thailand. This results in approximately a 25% reductions in client numbers in 3 months after the funding cuts. Fortunately, the integrations of gender-affirming care into universal health coverage will provide partial support for these services. However, the gaps during these transitions are likely to affect our clients. Our monthly salary has been reduced by up to 30%, and half of the institute's office space has been decommissioned. However, we still see the light at the end of the tunnel. Tangerine Clinic will persevere. We are doing our best to navigate this confusing time, and who knows, this time, next year, we might have another success story to tell. So what did we learn from today? Firstly, Tangerine Clinic exemplifies how community-driven initiatives can play significant roles in research, its translations, and its implementation. It serves as a proof that gender DEI is not just a principle that are appealed to the funders, but also practical in healthcare spaces and therefore should be prioritized. Secondly, Tangerine's clinic efforts in capacity building and policy advocacy have paved the way for the community solidarity and service scale up, not only in Thailand, but internationally as well. And lastly, trans-led and trans-owned programming is the key to HIV community responses and therefore should be sustained. Before I end this session, I would like to acknowledge all of these amazing organizations that help us through the journeys, our funders, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fair. I thought there you go. First, on a positive note, a shout out to Ms. Gung from the communications team at IHRI for the nice slides. Thanks for that comment in the chat. But getting to the really challenging aspects of your presentation, despite the successes that the Tangerine Clinic and IHRI have had, I mean, what you shared toward the end of your talk about the funding cuts, the reduction in services that could be offered for free to people. A question is in the chat about, are you able to estimate the losses in economic terms and language that people in the United States, especially policymakers, could understand or comprehend in terms of what this means for people in your organization?
Thank you, Dr. Annette, for that compliment as well. And cheers to Pikung from IHRI. She always made beautiful slides. And the answers to that question is rather hard for me to gauge because the funding cuts itself has been affected us in a very bigger schemes rather than just IHRI and Tangerine Clinic. So the economic impacts following the funding cuts can be a lot larger than what we have faced in Tangerine Clinic. Basically, the funding cuts is not only just the USAID and PEPFAR, but also the research grants that also affect our stability financially as well. So as you can see, we have to close out a lot of implementation projects, and that also affects our clients and our stability as well. So what we are trying to do now for Tangerine Clinic is, of course, to turn to domestic funding in order to gain more sustainability for the services. But I have to tell you the truth that it has been hard for us to find other sources of funding for our research programs, because that is not really a prioritization in Thailand as well. And with the waning programs and research opportunities worldwide, it has been harder for us to find, the fundings that are actually willing to explore gender DEI in our country. So that is the water that we still have to navigate.
I think I should also acknowledge at this point that sadly cuts to a grant that we have at AMFAR's Treat Asia program were directly responsible for some of the reductions that in your projects, in particular the Southeast Asia cohort study. So thanks very much to IHRI, Rainbow Sky Association of Thailand, Love Yourself in the Philippines, and G-Link in Vietnam for being able to adapt to those funding cuts. But perhaps on a more positive note, you had mentioned a $4 million investment by the government of Thailand into gender affirming care. I mean, I think in this time period, something like that seems so unusual and surprising. Can you share a little bit more about how you were able to secure that level of commitment from your government?
I think the main answer for that is, of course, to the community. We have such strong communities here for trans and gender diverse people in Thailand. They have been fighting, they have been advocating for several years. It takes very long time to advocate for this. I believe the first ever pitch to NHSO was actually around 5 or 6 years ago. And we have been constant in terms of our policy advocacy. And of course, the Tangerine cohorts provide the data that cannot be found anywhere else, because still up to this day, there has been a limited number of clinics that can provide a very comprehensive set of data to the government. We are actually very grateful that we can kind of contribute this data to inform the cost effectiveness study that the government is conducting, and therefore play quite an important role in the implementations of this policy. But of course, it has been a long journey. Scientifically evidence-based data is needed, and of course the communities, and of course the funders. So all of you help us achieve this today.
And maybe one more question before we move to our next speaker. So you had shared about the Tangerine Academy, which is your way of being able to do knowledge and advocacy transfer to programs in 9 Asian countries. Is there any opportunity for people, community organizations, clinics outside of Asia to tap into the resources of the Tangerine Clinic?
Oh, definitely, Dr. Annette. Thank you so much for your question as well, because after the impact of the funding cuts, we have to kind of like temporarily suspend the Tangerine Academy for a huge while because we don't have the fundings for those. But now that we can stand our feet again, we started to enroll people and register people to give this to become our trainees in our program again. So right now, Tangerine Academy is trying to gain their fundings or research grants in order to support their curriculum building process. And after, I would say, a few months after this, there might be some rolling out of registrations in our social media. So please follow us on social media. You can go to ihri.org to gain more information regarding that. We have Facebook and Instagrams, so please stay tuned, and we will be back again with Tangerine Academy for sure.
Well, that's a very positive and wonderful comment to end your session. Thank you so much, Dr. Fair, for your time, and thanks to your team for all of your dedicated service to the community. And if you're just joining us now, we are in hour 17, and I'm Annette Sohn from AMFAR's Treat Asia program, moderating the hour. And our next speaker is Dr. Katherine Gill. And Dr. Gill will be speaking on the topic, Adolescents Deserve Evidence Too, Closing the Research Gap in HIV Prevention. So welcome to you, Dr. Gill, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Annette. So hi, everyone. I am so excited to be part of this 24-hour global conversation on HIV research. It's inspiring to know that as we sit here today, people all around the world are tuning in, researchers, clinicians, activists, funders, and young people themselves, all united by the same commitment to ending HIV. So I'm Dr. Katherine Gill, and I work at the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation in Cape Town, and that is in South Africa. For the last 2 decades, our center has been at the forefront of HIV research and community engagement. And we always strive to bridge the gap between science and the lives of the people who need it the most. So today, I want to share a simple but powerful idea, and that is that adolescents deserve good, high-quality scientific evidence. Young people are at the heart of the HIV epidemic, yet for far too long, they've been left out of the research that guides how we prevent and treat HIV. And that has consequences. When adolescents are excluded from research, they're excluded from solutions. They're asked to wait, to watch, as adults receive new medicines first. And while their own needs remain unmet, but we can change that. Together, we can keep our young people safe and focused on what they should be doing, finishing school, growing up, falling in love, and living their lives HIV-free. So in Africa, adolescents remain at especially high risk for HIV. For many young people, the risks come through relationships, limited access to health services, and the social and economic pressures they face every day. For adolescent girls, the risks are even higher. Gender inequality, poverty, and gender-based violence all reduce their ability to protect themselves. These are not just statistics, they're daily realities in our communities. Yet most HIV prevention research has focused on adults. New medicines are developed and tested for older populations first, while adolescents are told to wait. But every year of waiting means more young people infected with HIV. We do have prevention tools like condoms and daily PrEP pills, and they work well when used consistently. But for many young people, daily use is difficult. Pills can be a reminder of stigma, and they don't always fit easily into the rhythms of adolescent life. If we want young people to stay safe, we need prevention options that meet them where they are, discreet, long-acting, and easy to use. And just as importantly, they need choice. Not every young person will want the same thing, and no single option will work for everyone. What matters is giving adolescents the ability to choose the method that feels right for them. One of the biggest problems is that adolescents are often left out of HIV prevention trials. This exclusion usually comes from a place of wanting to protect them, concerns about ethics, about consent, about risk. But in reality, this kind of protection is misguided. Because what happens when we leave adolescents out? New medicines are tested and approved for adults, while young people are told to wait. That waiting can take years. And in those years, thousands of adolescents will become infected with HIV. So instead of protecting them, we're actually harming them. Exclusion delays access, and delays mean preventable infections. True protection doesn't come from keeping young people out of research. True protection comes from including them safely and ethically, so they can benefit from the same scientific advances as everyone else. This is Masiphumelele, the community where I work. It's a township on the southern edge of Cape Town, home to about 40,000 people crowded into just half a square mile. Everywhere you look, there's energy and resilience, but also enormous challenges. Unemployment is high, families live in small, overcrowded homes, services are stretched thin, And for many young women, the threat of gender-based violence is part of daily life. In this environment, HIV risk is not abstract. It is something young people face every single day. Choices about school, relationships, or safety are made under constant pressure. And it's here, in communities like this, that prevention research matters most. That's why research here is so important. Because if we can find prevention strategies that work for adolescents in Masiphumelele with all its challenges and realities, then we know we are developing solutions that are truly relevant, practical, and life-changing. So let me tell you a little bit about the Purpose 1 study and what we did differently. For the first time, a major HIV prevention trial intentionally included adolescents aged 16 and 17, not as an afterthought, but as part of the main study design. We set out to answer a very clear question: does lenacapavir work to prevent HIV in young people? So lenacapavir is a new type of prevention medicine. It works differently from existing drugs and is given as a small injection just twice a year. In Purpose 1, we compared it to the standard prevention pill taken every day. This wasn't just about convenience. It was about testing whether this new approach, a long-acting injection, could actually protect adolescents from HIV. And what's most important, unlike most trials, adolescents didn't have to wait until adult data were collected. They were included right from the beginning. So now you might be wondering, how did we make sure it was safe and ethical to include adolescents in such a groundbreaking trial? We started by listening. From the earliest stages, we engaged with young people, their families, and community leaders. We asked them, what would make participation safe, respectful, and meaningful for adolescents? Their voices shaped the design of this study. We also work closely with regulators and ethics committees. Traditionally, trials begin with adults, and only years later are adolescents included. In Purpose 1, we took a different approach. We reviewed adult safety data early and worked with authorities to allow adolescents to join sooner. Consent was another important issue. In some cases, parental consent was required, but we also recognized that many adolescents are already independent decision makers. Where possible, emancipated adolescents were allowed to consent for themselves. Finally, we invested in making our clinics adolescent-friendly. We trained staff, created welcoming spaces, and built services that were sensitive to the needs of young people. In short, we didn't just add adolescents into an adult study. We built the trial with them and for them, ensuring that inclusion was both responsible and ethical. So what did we find? Among adolescents who received the twice-yearly injection of lenacapavir, there was 0 HIV infections, not a single one. This is a remarkable finding. It shows that lenacapavir, when given just twice a year, can provide powerful protection for young people who are at risk of HIV. We also listened to what the adolescents told us about their experience. Many said they preferred the injection over the daily pill, not because the pill doesn't work, but because an injection is discreet. It frees them from the burden of daily medication, and it fits better into the rhythm of their lives. These results give us something we have never had before: clear evidence that a long-acting option like lenacapavir can keep adolescents safe. And they show what is possible when we include young people in research, rather than asking them to wait at the margins. Of course, it's not enough for a medicine to be effective. It also has to be safe. In Purpose 1, we found that lenacapavir was safe and well tolerated in adolescents. No one had to stop treatment because of side effects. The safety profile in 16 and 17-year-olds looked just the same as adults. We also looked at how the medicine behaved inside the body, what scientists call pharmacokinetics, or PK. Put simply, this means checking whether the levels of medicine in the blood were strong enough to give protection, and whether those levels in adolescents matched what we see in adults. The answer was reassuring. The levels of lenacapavir in the blood of adolescents were almost identical to the levels in adults. That means we can be confident that the protection proven in adults can also be trusted for young people. So when we bring all of this together, the effectiveness, the safety, and the way the medicine works in the body, the message is clear. Lenacapavir is a safe and powerful new option for adolescents. So why does all of this matter? For the first time, we now have clear evidence that a long-acting injection can protect adolescents from HIV. This means regulators and policymakers don't need to wait years before making this option available to young people. The data are strong enough to support earlier action, and that could save countless lives. But beyond the science, this is really about fairness. For too long, adolescents have been left at the back of the line. They've been told to wait while adults receive new tools first. Purpose One shows that it doesn't have to be this way. We can design studies that include young people from the start. We can generate evidence that directly reflects their needs, and we can give them access to prevention at the same time as adults. When we do this, we don't just close the evidence gap. We open the door to a fairer, safer future, one where young people have the same right to protection as everyone else. This is about more than just one medicine. It's about justice, and it's about fairness. Adolescents should never be asked to stand at the back of the line when it comes to HIV prevention. They deserve the same evidence, the same protection, and the same opportunities as adults. And going forward, this should be the standard for research. Adolescents must be included from the very beginning, not an afterthought years later, because every delay has real consequences. Every year of waiting means preventable infections, lost opportunities, and lives cut short. When we design research that includes adolescents early, we give them the chance to live the lives they deserve, to dream about their futures, to finish school, to fall in love, and to live HIV-free. This is the fairer future we are working towards. I want to end in the spirit of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who reminded us that every human being deserves dignity and justice. I want to thank our participants, their families, and their communities. Without their courage, none of this would have been possible. I also thank our site staff, community advisors, and my colleagues for their dedication and commitment. And finally, I want to thank all of you for being here today. By showing up, by listening, and by supporting this work, you're part of something bigger. Together, we can be prevention warriors. Together, we can build a fairer future for our young people. And now we need to continue the campaign to make sure that young women all over Africa can access this life-saving medication. Thanks.
For that presentation, and I think your passion for working with this community really came through there. I mean, you emphasized the point that the young people who you worked with, they wanted to be involved. The 16 and 17-year-olds, they were ready to step up to be part of this program, to support and communicate with the researchers. So I get the sense that the challenge is not with the young people, it's with the adults. And so with that, maybe I could ask you a few questions. I mean, how did you convince the study sponsors, the Purpose One sponsors, to agree to have this study be the first to enroll adolescents at the same time as older adults?
So I think the answer to that is actually very, very clear, is that the study sponsor were actually the ones who came up with the idea. So back from 2019, while they were thinking about the design of the study, they actually had a meeting with community activists. And at that meeting, there was a young sex worker there. And she was absolutely adamant that the study had to include young people. And I think it's actually usually the young people who are the strongest advocates for being included in the study. So right from the beginning, there was agreement and support from the study sponsor. I think where we often find resistance is sometimes through the regulators. It's obviously the inclusion of adolescents does carry risk. Regulators are often quite risk averse for good reason. And I think that, again, with this particular protocol, in my country, in South Africa, The sponsor did very early engagement with the regulators, and then as sites we engaged with our ethics committee. So I think a lot of it is about sitting calmly before a study starts and talking through these issues with relevant authorities. So I think for me, Purpose One is hopefully going to change the way that we do adolescent research.
And you mentioned regulators, and so another topic that came to mind is consent. In many countries around the world, adolescents less than 18 cannot even consent for their own HIV test or sexual reproductive health or STI testing. How did you work with your ethics committee to allow you to inject a depot form of an antiretroviral that potentially has drug levels exceeding a year? I mean, I just can imagine some of the conversations that took place in trying to educate your IRB and your hospitals.
So what is interesting in South Africa is that adolescents can access health services without parental consent from the age of 12. So in my country, it actually didn't need a lot of convincing of the ethics committee, because that is standard of care in South Africa. So it's not a difficult thing to discuss. I think in South Africa, we often follow a very pragmatic approach to healthcare. It is ideal to have a parent with a child to help them make decisions. But in South Africa, because of the AIDS crisis, we find ourselves in a place where there are a lot of child-headed households. There was a whole generation of people who died from HIV in the early 2000s. So we find ourselves in a position where they're often not parents to ask for parental consent. So I think our ethics committees are very aware of, real life, what actually happens in our communities. And because adolescents can consent to contraception, to sexual to getting STI treatment, sexual health services. I don't think it was a hard thing to convince, but ethics committees, have a role to play in keeping people safe. And I think it requires a lot of interaction between the IRB and the researchers, and then also the community. The IRB wants to see that the community is supportive of this. They won't approve it if the community hasn't been engaged and is supportive.
And so you mentioned the engagement of the community. Can you share about how adolescents were involved after the start of the study in terms of providing feedback into study implementation, or how you are disseminating results of the study to adolescents and their communities?
So that's a great question. So we have at our site, we have 2 community advisory boards. We have one adult group and we have one adolescent group. We meet with our CABs every month, and before the start of the study, we would sit with them, discuss the consent forms. We often discuss the recruitment materials and just the general. So with the adolescents, we would ask questions like, how can we make our clinic more inviting? How can we make waiting times, improve waiting times? Adolescents are often very impatient. They don't like to wait. I mean, they've got things to do. They've got exams to write. They've got places to be. So I think we work closely with our adolescent group. With regards to study dissemination, we use obviously face-to-face in person. We also use a lot of social media, because that's where the adolescents are. And I think going forward, for me, what the most important and urgent priority is at the moment is making sure that these young people can actually access this drug. So it's issues now of equity, of access, of cost, and getting it now into the hands or bodies of the 10 million young people in this country that need it.
I think that's a really good place for us to stop here. Equity, access, and cost. Those three things will be critical in order for us to scale up long-acting injectable prevention technologies. So, Dr. Gill, thank you so much for your time, your presentation. I really enjoyed this discussion, and we look forward to seeing more data and evidence to support adolescent involvement in HIV research.
Thank you so much.
Okay, up next, I'm not sure if we have a testimonial video that we will be
Hi, my name is
doing.
Greg Gonzalez. I'm an AIDS researcher at the Yale University School of Public Health. More importantly, I'm somebody who's been living with AIDS since 1995 at least. I'm alive today because of antiretroviral therapy that has given me a new lease on life. I'm living proof that AIDS research has changed the world for the better. Come join us. Help us save AIDS research, which is under assault right now from an administration and a Congress which wants to cut funding for biomedical research and foreclose on advances that saved my life and the lives of millions of others. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to Greg Gonsalves for that testimonial. And if you're just joining us now, we're in the last talk of hour 17 for Save AIDS Research. I'm Annette Sohn from MANFAR's Treat Asia program. It is 2:40 in the afternoon here in Bangkok, and we are now looking forward to our final talk of the session by Dr. Mumbi Chola, who will be speaking on the movement toward greater Africa-led HIV science and the importance of global partnership. So Dr. Chola, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my talk is around the movement towards greater African-led HIV science and why global partnerships are important. And my affiliations are with the African-led HIV Control Working Group, as well as the Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia. So I'm sure, as we've heard over the past hours discussing this HIV in Africa, we have the largest burden. And recent UNAIDS data shows that approximately 65% of people living with HIV are in Eastern and Southern Africa, as well as Western and Central Africa. We have the largest burden of new infections as well as AIDS-related deaths. So what does this mean for African-led science? We need to have African-led science because it helps with building local expertise in in HIV research, as well as ensuring that we have local context and lived experiences reflected in the interventions and solutions that we design. It's also more effective and sustainable for our interventions, which are co-developed with our research experts, as well as the communities that we are serving. It's essential which is also essential for capacity building locally, as well as ensuring ownership of the solutions that we develop, reducing dependency and enhancing sustainability, as well as building resilient health systems. And it's also mutually beneficial for not just African scientists, but also the global partners, by ensuring that we have the necessary funding for this research, we have the technical expertise being provided, and exchange of knowledge through different platforms that help strengthen research locally, as well as ensuring that the resources are efficiently used, and we are also elevating African health priorities at the global stage. And in the recent past, most recently, we've had a lot of progress around HIV research, which is African-led. There's a lot of clinical trials that are being done around the HIV cure. Most of the work being led by the African Health Research Institute in Durban. We have a lot of regional networks that are being developed and strengthened. Lots of consortia that are being put together with training centers across the continent, which are fostering collaboration, south to south collaboration, as well as north to south collaboration, ensuring there's a lot of mentorship and local scientific leadership producing high quality research. We're also having a lot of interdisciplinary research going on, integration of social science as well as implementation science research, For example, the AHISA network, which has a lot of researchers, policymakers, program implementers that are part of that network across 11 countries. So we are moving towards African-led HIV research. Of course, we can always do more to strengthen this. In view of all the progress we're making, there are several challenges which are being worked towards being overcome. We have issues of over-reliance on external research or external funding, rather, which has been significantly impacted by the shifts in financing towards HIV at the global stage. We've got challenges with limited local investment and infrastructure. We have inequitable data ownership and research setting agendas. We've also got limited representation and capacity in scientific leadership, particularly from the continent. And we also have several health systems and socioeconomic barriers that impede or pose a challenge towards African-led research. So we have all these challenges that we need to overcome, even as we move towards or push forward the progress that we've achieved thus far. So in terms of the role of global partnerships towards research, we live in a global world. What happens in one corner of the world affects the rest of the globe. So we need these partnerships, and these partnerships are essential for funding and resource mobilization. We need investments in supporting infrastructure, training, and research, particularly in resource-constrained settings. We need to build capacity and technical support. We have a lot of gaps, like we discussed, in technical expertise on the continent. So through global partnerships, we'll be able to strengthen local capacities and empower African researchers and institutions to lead research, build sustainable HIV systems, as well as adopt innovative interventions, of course, tailored to local contexts. Through these global partnerships, we can facilitate collaborative networks and data sharing, leveraging multi-country collaborations and data platforms that enhance research quality, as well as enabling our African scientists to contribute and influence global health research agendas. And through these partnerships, we can also leverage on advocacy and policy influence by supporting efforts to reform legal and policy barriers, reduce stigma, discrimination, as well as increase political commitment towards HIV research, as well as the HIV response in general. And through advocacy and policy influence, we can also ensure that African-led science informs national policies, as well as improve program delivery on the ground while promoting equitable health outcomes. And we cannot, of course, forget the importance of the communities and how their involvement in research impacts policies. So from, I think, the onset, communities have been at the forefront in HIV research beyond just through providing, of course, the necessary data, participating in the trials and so on. So they remain a key partner in HIV research and science on the continent. So we need to ensure that we have people living with HIV, young leaders at the core of not just the global HIV response, but research as well. So we need to ensure that all the research that is being translates and is benefiting the communities that not just provide the data, but through their lived experiences, provide the context in which we can develop sustainable solutions and interventions that can ultimately achieve the goal of eliminating HIV as a public health threat. So what can we do going forward in order to sustain HIV research? We need to make sure that we integrate research into our local health systems. We need to have community involvement, having models that have the community as part of the research, not just merely providing data. We need sustainable and diversified funding towards research and the HIV responses, and we also need to leverage innovation and data-driven decision-making as we embark on strengthening HIV-led research. And so, as part of our call to action, through the work that we've done with Dr. Jakkrapatara and Dr. Judith Hobak, we've led the drafting of the Kigali Declaration, where we are calling for embracing meaningful partnerships, as well as supporting global HIV research. And of course, having African-led research at the core of that. And as part of the HIV Control Working Group, we've put out several publications around strengthening political commitment towards not just the HIV, but the research agenda as well on the continent. We need to invest in sustainable domestic financing towards HIV research, as well as the HIV response in general. And also we need to ensure that we have strengthened and sustained global partnerships, which of course amplify the African-led research agendas and science, enhancing evidence-based policymaking on the continent. I think that's where I end my presentation. Thank you very much. And over to you, Annette.
Really helpful and comprehensive overview about what priorities we need to look to in the coming months, years, maybe even decades. And yet at the same time, I think we're observing a really immediate crisis where we are in true emergency mode again, in terms of funding cut for research, funding cut for training, for clinical services. Could you comment on what is happening now across the continent in terms of critical stopgap measures that are being implemented to try to reverse the losses that are happening now, whether it's loss of life or loss of research capacity?
I think there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of research that's been going on that's been largely US funded, and with the funding cuts, it has been severely impacted. But I think for the most part, most of the research is still ongoing. Most of institutions that are leading this research are trying to leverage other sources of funding. In some countries, the governments have stepped in to finance some of this work. So there are a lot of measures that are being put in place to try and minimize the impact on the research, particularly certain key research such as the HIV cure work and so on, through leveraging other partners beyond US-based funding.
Mm. And before I get to the question in the chat, maybe I could follow up on something you just said about trying to work across different countries. So could you share more about collaborations between country to country? How is that working? Whether it's within a sub-region, say just East and Southern Africa or West Africa or just all across the continent, how do you see leadership country to country evolving in light of these recent funding cuts?
I think there's a gravitation towards more regional and cross-country collaboration. So a lot of South-to-South collaboration within the continent. You have a lot of consortia and networks that are being formed or that are being strengthened that have existed before, that are cutting across several countries, not just could be within specific regions like Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, but we are also having collaboration across the country. We did speak about the AHISA network, which covers 11 countries. We've got other consortia that cover multiple countries. So there's a lot of gravitation towards supporting networks from that work towards South-to-South collaboration. Yeah. So of course, like we said, it's a global partnership. We still have research partners from the global north as part of some of these consortium, but with the funding cuts, I think there's trying to leverage more of South-to-South collaborations as well.
Mm. And then from the chat, we have a question about the Kigali Declaration. And for those people who did not attend the IAS Science Conference in Kigali, could you share a little bit more about what the declaration kind of the impetus behind the declaration and where the declaration is being taken forward?
Right. So the declaration was born out of it was kind of serendipitous, so to speak. I had published with the African-led HIV control working group some work around how we can sustain the HIV response and the need for Africa to take a leading role. And Dr. Jakkrapatara had published similar work around the need to finance PEPFAR and the importance of the work that they've been doing in the HIV space for the past 2 decades or thereabouts. So as a result of that, we kind of collaborated, and we're looking at the same coin from 2 different perspectives. So we came up together with Dr. Judith Obak to kind of have a few key things that we can all band together for all well-meaning people who would like to see the gains that we've achieved thus far towards in the HIV response maintained, and as well as push towards the goals that we've set for ourselves in terms of eliminating HIV as a public health threat. So we drafted that, and then we put it out. We had a lot of signatures with several notable individuals. I think we got to over 750 signatures, and eventually the International AIDS Society, we reached out to them to see if they would be willing to come on board to support the declaration, and we had several conversations, and at the International AIDS Conference in Kigali, it was pretty much endorsed, and from then on, we worked with the International AIDS Society to kind of push the agenda towards some of those 5 points that we've highlighted in the Kigali Declaration. So we are, beyond just having it endorsed, we are working behind the scenes to try and have support from the broader community and have it endorsed by more than just the communities, but key government officials and funders and the like.
Okay, and this might end up being our last question for this session and for your talk specifically, but you mentioned cure a few times. First, in the context of it being a key area that Africa-led science was evolving around, as well as an opportunity for collaboration and tapping into funding streams outside of the US government, for example. So could you comment a little bit more about the role of cure research in what you see as the evolution of Africa-led HIV science?
I think the research into the HIV cure remains very critical in the fight against HIV. We have several tools on the prevention side, most recently the lenacapavir, which is very effective in preventing infection. But the HIV cure work remains pivotal to ending HIV. And so I think that's why there's been a lot of emphasis around ensuring that what has been done so far is not affected, or we try and limit as much as possible the impact of the funding towards that. So it remains a very crucial piece of work in the goal towards ending HIV as a public health threat.
And maybe a short follow-up on that. Related to cure, is this something that the researchers within Africa are also engaging community around? Is this something that the community has emphasized as being important?
Yes. So if you look at all the work that has been done, be it lenacapavir or all these other trials, African communities have been heavily involved in that work. We have community leaders like Yvette Raphael, who've been part of or central to some of the work that's been done, representing networks of people living with HIV and the like. So the communities, of course, remain central to this. This is important work that they are fully supportive. I know for a fact yeah, so yeah, communities definitely need this work to be pushed through and seen to the end.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Chola, for your presentation and this conversation. And with that, I think that we've reached the end of hour 17. Please join me in thanking all of our 3 speakers for this hour. I've really enjoyed the conversations that we've been able to have, the opportunity for discussion, and hopefully those who are joining live as well as those who are watching later on will be able to learn from your commitment to the science as well as the science